Hey, where exactly are you headed at this hour?
Riverdale, sir. I have to start my new job at 7 a.m.
That's 7 miles away. Did you walk all this way already?
I walked 11 miles. My car broke down. I need this job.
That's a long way.
When a broke 22-year-old woman's car quit the night before her first day on the job, she faced an impossible choice that would change everything. What she chose to do next left a police officer stunned and ignited a movement that reached millions across the country. All's journey from desperation to triumph wasn't only about survival. It was about the kind of raw determination most people only talk about but never actually live. Before we continue, we just want to say how glad we are that you're here with us. Your support keeps our channel alive, and we truly appreciate it. Take a second and tell us where you're watching from. Whether you're in New York, Toronto, London, Sydney, or a town we've never heard of, drop your location in the comments below. And if this is your first time watching, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give us a like. We'd love to have you as part of this community. Also, if you'd like to support what we do, consider joining our channel membership to help us keep bringing you these powerful stories. As our way of saying thank you, members receive a magic code that unlocks the complete game center in Omni Studio, our brand new platform, where you can create personalized safety cards and access brain-boosting cognitive games. Just click the join button below this video to become a member and claim your exclusive bonus. All Voss had turned 22 only 3 weeks before the move. She and her mother had lost nearly everything when Superstorm Zephyr tore through their neighborhood, ripping open their home and flinging their belongings across flooded streets. Insurance had covered barely half of what they needed to start over. So, they packed what remained into borrowed boxes and drove south to Vista Creek, Georgia, where her mother's cousin had offered them temporary shelter. That first week in Vista Creek felt suffocating. All watched her mother's face grow thinner with worry. Bills were piling up. Their savings had evaporated. They needed income immediately, not in a month or two. Ara applied everywhere within 20 miles. Gas stations, grocery stores, restaurants. Most places never called back. The ones that did offered part-time hours that wouldn't cover rent. Then came the callback from Riverdale Logistics, a moving company 18 miles north in Riverdale. The manager, a no-nonsense woman named Martha Peterson, had looked over Ara's application and liked what she saw. Alla drove her aging sedan to the interview, hands gripping the wheel as the engine rattled ominously. She answered every question with confidence she didn't entirely feel. She needed this job desperately, and Mrs. Peterson seemed to sense it. At the end of the interview, Mrs. Peterson reached out her hand. The job was hers. Full-time benefits after 90 days. Start tomorrow morning at 7 sharp. All nearly cried with relief. She thanked Mrs. Peterson 3 times, promised she wouldn't let her down, and walked back to her car, feeling like she could finally breathe again. She turned the key, the engine rattled once, sputtered, and went dead. She tried again. Nothing. Smoke began seeping from under the hood in thick, oily clouds. All got out and stared at the car in disbelief. The engine was completely destroyed. She had no money for repairs, none. Her mother had barely enough to cover groceries for the week. Allah called a tow truck she couldn't afford and had the car dragged to a mechanic who delivered the news she already knew. The engine was dead. A full replacement would cost at least $2,000. He could maybe patch it for $800, but it would die again within weeks. Ara thanked him and walked away, her mind racing through impossible calculations. She sat on the curb outside the mechanic shop and pulled out her phone. The address for Riverdale Logistics glowed on the screen. She switched to the map and selected walking directions. The route lit up in blue. 18.3 miles. Estimated time 6 hours and 12 minutes. All couldn't stop staring at that number. 6 hours. She had to be there by 7 in the morning. If she missed her first day, Mrs. Peterson would assume she was unreliable. The job would vanish. Another family, depending on her mother's cousin for charity. Another month of watching her mother pretend everything was fine, while slowly breaking apart inside. She couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't let that happen. Ara walked the 3 miles back to the house, her decision already made. She told her mother the car had broken down, but assured her everything would be fine. She didn't mention the walk. Her mother would have tried to stop her, would have insisted they find another way, but there was no other way. That night, Alara set an alarm for 1 a.m. She laid out her sturdiest pair of sneakers, the ones with decent tread left. She filled a water bottle and tucked 2 granola bars into her jacket pocket. She tried to sleep, but mostly stared at the ceiling, running through the route in her mind. When the alarm buzzed, she didn't hesitate. She dressed in silence, laced her shoes tight, and slipped out the front door into the cool darkness. The street was empty. No cars, no lights in any windows, just her and the long road ahead. She started walking, 1 foot in front of the other. The first mile felt easy. The second mile felt manageable. By the 3rd mile, her calves were already starting to burn. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, illuminated only by the occasional streetlight and the cold glow of her phone screen. All kept the map open, watching the blue dot inch forward with agonizing slowness. She passed closed gas stations and darkened strip malls. A few trucks rumbled past, their headlights briefly flooding the road before leaving her in darkness again. By mile 5, her feet were throbbing. The sneakers that had seemed sturdy enough now felt paper-thin against the relentless pavement. She adjusted her stride, trying to favor her left foot, then her right, but the pain simply spread. She checked the time. 3:15 in the morning, she was making decent progress, but not fast enough. Ara picked up her pace. Her breathing grew heavier. Sweat soaked through her shirt despite the cool night air. She thought about her mother, sleeping peacefully back home, unaware of where her daughter was right now. She thought about Mrs. Peterson's firm handshake and the trust in her eyes when she'd offered the job. She couldn't betray that trust. Mile 7, 8 mile. Her legs were trembling now, muscles screaming with every step. She stopped once to drink water and immediately regretted it. Standing still made everything hurt worse. She forced herself to keep moving, pushing through the pain that radiated from her ankles to her hips. The sky began to lighten around 4:30. Dawn was coming, and with it the reality that she still had miles to go. R's pace had slowed considerably. Each step felt like dragging weights. Her vision blurred with exhaustion, and she blinked hard, refusing to let fatigue win. By 5 a.m., she had covered just over 11 miles. Her body was soaked in sweat. Her legs shook violently with each stride, but she was still moving, still fighting. Then she saw them flashing blue lights in her rear view, growing brighter as they approached from behind. A police cruiser. Patrolman Miles Davidson had been on duty since 10 the previous night. It had been a long, quiet shift, filled with routine traffic stops and one domestic dispute that resolved peacefully. Now, as dawn approached, he was eager to finish his patrol and head home. Then his headlights caught something unusual. A figure walking alone on the highway shoulder, moving slowly, almost staggering. At this hour on this stretch of road, that meant trouble. Drunk pedestrian, someone fleeing a crime scene, maybe someone high and disoriented. Davidson flipped on his lights and pulled alongside the figure. It was a young woman, early 20s, drenched in sweat, her face pale and exhausted. She looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Davidson rolled down his window and studied her carefully. She didn't appear intoxicated, no smell of alcohol. Her clothes were neat but soaked through. Her sneakers were caked in road dust. He asked where she was going. The question came out sharper than he intended, but suspicion was second nature after years of patrol. The young woman was breathing too hard to answer immediately. She bent forward, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. Davidson stepped out of the cruiser. He asked again, firmer this time. Where was she headed, and why was she walking the highway at 5 in the morning? The woman straightened up and met his eyes. Her voice came out in gasps, broken by exhaustion. She said she was going to Riverdale Logistics. She had to be there by 7 for her first day of work. Her car had died yesterday, and she had no other way to get there. She'd been walking since 1 a.m. Davidson stared at her. 18 miles. She'd been walking for 4 hours straight. He looked down at her trembling legs and the desperate determination in her face. This wasn't a criminal. This wasn't someone running from something. This was someone running towards something, fighting for something. Everything he thought he understood about this stop had just changed. Davidson had pulled over hundreds of people during his career. He'd heard every excuse, every sob story, every desperate plea. Most were lies wrapped in just enough truth to sound believable. But this young woman wasn't lying. He could see it in the way her entire body shook with exhaustion. He asked her name. She told him, "I Voss." He asked where she'd started. "Vista Creek," she said. He did the math in his head. She had already walked over 11 miles. In the dark, alone with 7 more to go. Davidson looked at his watch. 6:03. Even if she kept walking, she'd never make it by 7. Her legs were barely holding her up right now. But if he left her here, she'd keep trying anyway. She collapsed on this highway, trying to reach a job she'd already lost. He made his decision. He told Ara to get in the car. She hesitated, confused. He repeated himself gentler this time. Get in. He was taking her to Riverdale. Ara's face crumpled with relief. She climbed into the back seat and immediately slumped against the window. Davidson pulled back onto the highway and accelerated. The remaining 7 miles passed in minutes. All stared out the window, too exhausted to speak, too overwhelmed to fully process what was happening. They arrived at Riverdale Logistics at 6:37, 23 minutes early. Davidson parked near the entrance and helped out of the cruiser. Her legs nearly gave out when she tried to stand. He steadied her and walked her to the door. Mrs. Peterson was inside setting up for the day. She looked up startled to see a police officer escorting her new employee. Davidson introduced himself and asked if he could speak with her privately. Mrs. Peterson's expression shifted from confusion to concern. Then Davidson told her everything. The dead car, the 1 a.m. departure, the 11-mile walk before he found her, the refusal to give up even when her body was failing. Mrs. Peterson stood there speechless, staring at with something close to awe. Mrs. Peterson had managed Riverdale Logistics for 14 years. She had hired dozens of employees, trained hundreds of temporary workers, and dealt with every personality type imaginable. She'd seen people quit after 1 day. She'd seen workers show up late with elaborate excuses. She'd even had someone sleep through their entire first shift and blame traffic. But she had never seen anything like this. A young woman so determined to keep her word that she'd walk through the night rather than call with an excuse. Mrs. Peterson felt something shift in her chest as she looked at Ara, still trembling with exhaustion, eyes red from fatigue, but still standing. She told Ara to sit down. She brought her water and insisted she drink slowly. She asked Officer Davidson to repeat the story, needing to hear it again to believe it was real. Davidson obliged, adding details about the condition he'd found in and how close she'd been to collapsing. Mrs. Peterson made a decision in that moment. This story couldn't stay quiet. People needed to hear about this kind of dedication. The world was full of complaints and excuses, and people giving up at the first obstacle. Here was someone who'd literally walked 18 miles to prove she meant what she said. After Officer Davidson left, Mrs. Peterson helped get settled. She gave her the first 2 hours to rest and recover before starting any actual work. She made sure ate something and changed into the spare clothes she kept in her office. Then, while was resting, Mrs. Peterson pulled out her phone. She opened social media and began typing. She wrote about meeting Ara the day before, about the interview and the handshake and the promise, about the car breaking down and the impossible choice, about the walk through darkness and the police escort, and the arrival 23 minutes early. She hit post and set her phone down, expecting maybe a few dozen people to see it. Maybe some friends would share it. Maybe it would inspire someone local. That would be enough. What happened next was beyond anything she could have imagined. The post went live at 7:42 in the morning. By 8:15, it had been shared 200 times. By 9:30, it had reached 10,000 shares. Local news stations in Georgia picked it up before lunch. By mid-afternoon, national outlets were calling Mrs. Peterson's office asking for interviews. The story spread like wildfire across every platform. People couldn't stop talking about the young woman who'd walked 18 miles to keep a promise. Comments poured in by the thousands. Some shared their own stories of struggle. Others offered words of encouragement. Many simply expressed disbelief that someone would go to such lengths for a job. Someone set up a GoFundMe page with a modest goal of $3,000 to help Lara repair her car. The link was shared alongside Mrs. Peterson's post. Within hours, donations started flooding in. $5, $10, $20, $50, $100. The total climbed steadily throughout the day. By evening, the fund had passed $10,000. By midnight, it had crossed $25,000. People from across the country were contributing. Titers, truck drivers, nurses, retirees, college students, strangers who'd never met Ara but felt moved by her determination. Ara had no idea any of this was happening. She'd worked her full shift despite the exhaustion, refusing special treatment. She'd learned the warehouse systems, met her co-workers, and completed every task assigned to her. When Mrs. Peterson finally showed her the post and the GoFundMe page at the end of the day, couldn't speak. She stared at the numbers on the screen, unable to process what she was seeing. The fund continued growing overnight. By the next morning, it had surpassed $40,000. Major news networks were running segments about her story. Social media influencers were sharing it with millions of followers. All's walk had become a symbol of something people desperately wanted to believe in. Hard work, dedication, refusing to quit when everything seemed impossible. But the biggest surprise was still coming, and it arrived in the form of a silver Toyota RAV4 pulling into the Riverdale Logistics parking lot 3 days later. Silas Kish had built Riverdale Logistics from a single truck and a storage unit 28 years ago. He'd grown the company into a regional powerhouse with 6 locations and over 200 employees. He'd always believed in rewarding hard work, but what he'd read about Lara went beyond hard work. It represented the kind of character you couldn't teach or train. He'd watched the story unfold from his corporate office in Atlanta. He'd read the social media posts, he'd seen the news coverage, he'd watched the GoFundMe total climb higher each day, and he'd made a decision that surprised even his own executive team. Kish drove his personal Toyota RAV4, only 8 months old, the 70 miles from Atlanta to Riverdale. He arrived mid-morning and asked Mrs. Peterson to bring to the front office. She had no idea why the CEO himself had shown up unannounced. When Ara walked into the office, Kish stood and extended his hand. He introduced himself and thanked her for the incredible dedication she'd shown. He told her that her story had inspired thousands of people, including him. Then he did something that left Ara completely speechless. He pulled out the keys to the RAV4 and placed them in her hand. The vehicle was hers. No payments, no strings attached. Just a gift from someone who recognized what true commitment looked like. All stared at the keys, then at Kish, then back at the keys. She tried to speak, but couldn't form words. Tears streamed down her face as the reality sank in. Not only did she have $40,000 from strangers who believed in her, but now she had reliable transportation. Her mother would have security. They could rebuild their lives properly. Kish smiled and told her she'd earned it, not through connections or luck, but through sheer determination to keep her word. He left shortly after, but the impact of his gesture rippled outward, just like everything else connected to Allah's story. The GoFundMe page eventually closed at $43,000. Allah used part of it to move her mother into a proper apartment. She saved the rest for emergencies and her mother's medical bills. She continued working at Riverdale Logistics, eventually earning a promotion to shift supervisor. Her story became required viewing for new hires, a reminder of what the company valued most. Officer Davidson received a commendation for his compassion and judgment that early morning. He and Alara stayed in touch, and he later admitted that stopping to help her had reminded him why he'd become a police officer in the first place. All's 18 Isima walk became more than just a viral moment. It became proof that showing up matters, that keeping your word matters, that sometimes the hardest path leads to places you never imagined possible. So, here's the question worth asking. When faced with an impossible choice, would you give up or would you start walking? Would you make excuses or would you find a way? All chose to walk, and that choice changed everything. If this story moved you, go ahead and hit that like button. Drop a comment telling us what you think. Would you have done what Allah did? And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. We've got more incredible stories like this coming your way. And we'd love for you to be part of this journey with us.